Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So welcome. Tonight will be a keynote about adventure. Tonight will be a keynote about exploration. So we are very pleased to welcome Alastair Humphreys, who is a very well-known British adventurer and author. So Alastair traveled through many countries, more than 80 countries, by bicycle, by boat, on foot. So I don't even know why we booked a ticket for you. Probably you can come back by yourself. By the way, Alastair is very well known because he got a very big prize in the field. He was named by the National Geographic as one of the adventurers of the year for the year 2012. And he did something that is very close to us because he did a 1,000-kilometer crossing of the Empty Quarter. So he's coming tonight to share with us his experience. So welcome, Alastair, and enjoy the talk. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along. Thank you for inviting me. I've been here just for a couple of days, and one thing I've noticed in the couple of days that I've been at KAUST is that everyone is very, very clever. That is something I've definitely noticed and start to feel slightly insecure and uncomfortable about. I've been to a couple of talks, brilliant talks, of which I understood about half. So today, if you're like me, not very clever, then I hope you will enjoy pretty pictures. I've even got a picture of a cute camel, so there will surely be something for everyone. But I thought, right, I need to be intelligent here. I'm at a very important place. I've got to be serious. So I'm going to start by asking you a question that you won't understand, and that will make me feel better about myself. What I hope is that by the end of the talk, though, you will understand that question, and more than that, you will have an answer yourself. So my question for this evening is, what is your doorstep mile? What is your doorstep mile? Hopefully, by the end of my talk, you will have an answer to that. The doorstep mile is a Scandinavian phrase. It translates as the doorstep mile. And what it refers to is the difficulty of beginning things. So imagine you live in Norway, beautiful house in the woods, nice log fire. It's freezing cold and snowy outside, and you're watching TV with your beautiful Norwegian wife, and it's all very nice. And then you have to go outside, and it's dark and cold and snowy, and it's difficult to do it, to think, oh, I can't get out my front door and start. This is so difficult. That's the doorstep mile. The doorstep mile, if ever you've thought, right, I'm going to get fit. I'm going to set my alarm for 6 o'clock in the morning. And then the alarm goes off, and you can't take the step from your bed to the floor. The doorstep mile is this first little step. And I wish I'd known this phrase years ago when I first started dreaming of adventures myself. It would have helped me realize that I'm not really alone. Whenever I'm at the start line of a journey or an expedition now, whether I'm at the beginning of a desert about to set off or the beginning of an ocean about to try and cross it, I'm never there thinking, this is a great expedition and I'm a heroic explorer, this is going to be good. Always when I'm at the start of an expedition, I'm thinking, oh, I wish I wasn't here. I wish I was back home on my sofa watching TV. This is too difficult. It's too hot. It's too cold. It's too wet. It's too dry. I'm going to die. Oh, I wish I wasn't here. Oh, and I get in this terrible state. And then eventually I set off and I think, this isn't so bad. And off I go. So the doorstep mile is what I want to try and talk about tonight. I've just noticed the man with the light, he's having to shine it wherever I go. So look, if I stand here, he shines it. And if I go like this, he's very, very good. So this evening, if you're not very intelligent, you can wait for the picture of the camel, and you can watch me trying to run away from the light. For the rest of you, let me tell you about this man. This is Wilfred Thesiger. I hope you got a chance to see some of the beautiful photographs exhibited outside from his journeys, and also the beautiful maps from expeditions around Arabia that are presented out there. Wilfred Thesiger is one of my heroes. He's dead now, he was a British explorer, and he did lots of expeditions around the world. The ones that are relevant tonight are his journeys around the Empty Quarter Desert, the Rub al-Khali, sorry for my pronunciation, and he was a wonderful photographer, and a very good writer, and he was a bit of a hero of mine. In fact, I chose my university, Oxford University, to a large degree because Wilfred Thesiger had gone there. And when I got there, I joined the boxing club like he'd done. I thought, I'm going to be brilliant at this. And I got in the boxing ring, and someone punched me on the nose, and I thought, no, that's the end of my boxing days. Wilfred Thesiger did all sorts of journeys, expeditions, and he wrote beautifully about it. His most famous book is called Arabian Sands. I was very excited when I got to see his diary, his diary from his expedition with all of his notes that eventually became the book. Arabian Sands is a beautiful book. It's a few things, really. It's the story of an epic expedition. It's a love letter to this region, to Arabia, and to the people who live there. And then for me, thirdly, it was almost like a manifesto or a guide to living a simple, hard, self-challenging life. And so his book really captured my imagination when I first read it when I was at university, and I thought, wow, one day I would love to go and do a journey of my own in the empty quarter. I don't know how, but one day I would love to do that. So Arabian Sands is a very important book for me. Wilfred Thesiger didn't travel alone. He traveled with a series of different Bedou companions and guides on all of his expeditions. But the guides he was with, they couldn't read, they couldn't write, they didn't write books of their own, they didn't write stories of their own. And so in Britain, at least, the notion of the empty quarter is very much linked to Wilfred Thesiger, the guy who wrote the story, which I think is a small note to all of us to remember the power of being the storyteller, or the importance of being the storyteller. And a little challenge for you this evening is to try to think of what it is that you're passionate about, or an expert about, or interested in, and think, how can you tell that story? Maybe you will write a book. Maybe you will do, as I did, start writing a blog, which your mum and 3 other people read, and nobody else. It doesn't matter. You're sharing what you care about, or maybe you can answer questions on Quora or Reddit or something that you are an expert at. But getting your voice out there and starting to build that as a habit, I think is a really good thing to do. So, back in the 1940s, Wilfred Thesiger made a series of journeys around the empty quarter. It's a bit hard to see, but he did all sorts of journeys, zigzagging all over the peninsula. And I started thinking, wow, they're amazing. I'd love one day to do something like this. And so now, this is the first time I've actually come to Saudi Arabia. I'm very excited to have finally made it to the kingdom. Camel! Yes, there's the camel. That's the only cute picture of the talk. So if you're done with that, you can leave now. I wasn't really planning to go to the empty quarter when I ended up going. I was actually planning a journey to the South Pole. Again, in the footsteps of another of my heroes, an adventurer called Captain Scott. Going to the South Pole is an expensive way to go camping. I needed £1 million. I spent 5 years chasing £1 million for the journey, and failed. Failed to get the £1 million, and so I was pretty fed up. I'd wasted 5 years of my life. I was depressed. I was annoyed. I was unhappy. So I thought I should cheer myself up in the way that British people cheer ourselves up, and I decided to go on a beach holiday. My beach holiday was to go and walk across the empty quarter. It was an expedition, just like going to the South Pole. It was following in the footsteps of a hero. It was going to be physically difficult. The journeys were surprisingly similar, despite one being in Antarctica and one being in somewhere incredibly hot. The downside was I only had 6 weeks to get ready for this empty quarter trip. Wilfred Thesiger and his team crossed the empty quarter by camel. I was not going to go by camel for a few reasons. 1, I couldn't afford a camel. 2, I'm really scared of camels. 3, I don't know how to drive a camel. So the camel option was out. It was just going to be me. I knew nothing about this part of the world, these sort of desert expeditions, camels, nothing at all. And ironically then, that was what made me decide to not come with a guide. I didn't want to go on a trip where I knew absolutely nothing and I teamed up with some people who knew everything, because that would just turn me into a tourist, just following along stupidly behind some guys who knew what they were doing. And I preferred to just come and try and learn for myself. Plus, I wasn't doing it with camels, so How hard can it be? Walking across the desert, wear some sun cream, drink lots of water, don't get lost, don't die. Pretty simple. So I needed to, by the way, after this talk, we're going to be showing the film that I made of the expedition. So I'll try not to spoil too many things later for the film. It's quite hard to train for the empty quarter when you live in London. There are not many deserts in Britain. So I recruited a friend of mine. Actually, he wasn't a friend. I didn't know this guy. I try not to think about this too much, but nobody ever goes on an expedition with me twice. So I've now run out of friends who will come on trips with me. And I've now got onto this category of having to say to my friends, do you have a friend who might come with me? And that's how I ended up with the guy I went with. He was called Leon. He was the friend of a friend. I phoned him up and said, you don't really know me. Do you want to walk across the empty quarter desert? We leave in 6 weeks' time. And he, being a bit of an idiot, said, yes. So we we started preparing. We weren't going to have camels, so we had to be human camels. We needed a cart to pull all of our food, all of our supplies. I was the lead engineer for this project, designed a cart. We took it to the desert, which is the nearest beach you can get to just outside of London. It was raining, the sand was very wet, and we pulled it for an hour through the sand. After an hour, we thought, this is really hard work. Let's stop. Because if we keep going, we'll get really tired and call this whole thing off. So we did 1 hour of exercise, thought, that's too hard. Let's just go to the desert and begin. So we flew out to Oman and to what we've been looking forward to, the silence, this beautiful, empty desert, unchanged in millions of years, and just us off on our heroic expedition, like Wilfred Thesiger, walking through the silence, the beauty of the empty quarter desert. And then we realized we were actually in the Middle East in the 21st century, and that the 21st century is quite a difficult place to begin a journey with a big cart. We started in Salalah, which is where Wilfred Thesiger began, and started hauling our cart out of Salalah with the crazy traffic, which all of you will be familiar with living in this part of the world, zooming around, beeping at us, and we were just thinking, this is a terrible, terrible idea. We're going to die before we even get out of town. Even worse, we realized within the first few minutes of this journey that giving me the role of lead cart designer had been a terrible idea, a very bad idea. I really have no design skills. I don't have many skills at all, but I certainly don't have cart building skills. For example, I thought we were going to go from Salalah through Oman into the Emirates. We couldn't come on our trip through Saudi, unfortunately, so we were just going to be in Oman, through to the Emirates, in a desert, nice straight line. So let's build a cart that goes in a nice straight line. Don't need any steering. Straight line, off we go. So we had this cart that had no way to steer that weighed 350 kilograms, which we realized very quickly was a ridiculously bad idea. Within about 1 hour, we were just here by the side of the road, and we had to quit. The expedition was in ruins. There was no way we could carry on. So we went feeling very embarrassed, took our cart into the back streets of Salalah and sought out some people who knew what they were doing in life. If an adventure, well, if an expedition runs perfectly as planned, that's a very sensible, good expedition. If an expedition has no challenges at all, then it's a gentle holiday. If an expedition is quite hard and goes wrong at times, that's when you start to get an adventure. And what I've been trying to do in my life is to embrace the adventures, to enjoy the stuff that goes wrong, and to realize that at the time they're not good things to be happening, but they usually lead to more excitement, more rewarding journeys, and more interesting stuff happening. So I try as best I can in everything I do in life to be pleased when stuff goes wrong and to be curious about what directions it will go off in. The 3 days we spent in the little mechanics huts in the back streets of Salalah with some guys without welding torches welding away and sawing stuff and just laughing at how stupid these two British people were some of the happiest days of the whole journey. It was a wonderful thing being with these guys. They helped us fix the cart, put us some steering on, and we were off at long last. off out into the sand, and now all we had to do was walk. We had our cart. It had food for 40 days. We had water for 10 days. We had to get fine water along the way, and it weighed 350 kilograms, and there were just the two of us, and off we went. And now all we had to do was walk on our own through the desert to Dubai. What could possibly go wrong? So we thought this might sound as though it's quite a big step to take, a big thing to launch into. But in reality, this trip, like every other trip I've done, is nothing more than the accumulation of lots and lots of small little steps. So before I start to tell you about the steps we took into the desert, I need to tell you about the steps that got me to the desert in the first place. This is me in my garden back in England when I was a little boy. You can see my parents' grass has got much better when they retired, and they didn't have to look after me anymore. When I was a little boy, I wasn't very adventurous at all. I was just a normal little kid. Went to school, just a normal kid at school. Went to university, just a normal student. I was never really very adventurous at all. But when I was at university, I started reading. I started reading stories of travel, of adventure, of expeditions. And I used to read these books and think, wow, these stories are amazing. And then I'd put the book down, they'd get on with normal life. And I really enjoyed reading them. Gradually, though, I started to read these books and think, wow, these stories are amazing. I wonder if I could do something like this. So I was starting to think, I wonder if I could do a trip like this. And the answer, of course, was no. Of course you can't do crazy big expeditions because you are a normal person, quite lazy, not very brave, and a bit stupid. So I thought, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't do expeditions. I'll just carry on with normal life. But something in my mind just kept ticking over, and I kept thinking, I'd really like to try a big adventure. I'd really like to try something. And gradually I started to think, you know, if I go do a big adventure, I'll probably fail, but what if I don't? What if I don't fail? What if I actually do this thing? That would be amazing, wouldn't it? And then I thought, what if I fail? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Well, you might die, but I tend to not to leave dying out of decisions about life, because we're all going to die anyway. So leave aside the fact you might die. Generally speaking, if I go off on an adventure, what's the worst thing that will happen? I'll fail, I'll come home, my friends will laugh at me and tease me, and I'll feel like a bit of a loser. Which is exactly what I feel like right now, stuck in Britain, living a pretty boring life, being a bit of a loser. So in other words, I've got absolutely nothing to lose, so I should stop being so pathetic. I should get out the front door, take the first step out the front door, and go and do something exciting with my life. So I gave myself that speech. I got very excited. Thought, right, I'm going to go do a big adventure. What shall I do? Wow, the whole world is out there. You open your atlas, so many places, so many things to do. What sort of expedition should I do? What sort of thing could I do? So I started thinking. And then I realized there were a few problems. One, all these big adventures you hear about. I used to love, I still do actually, but I used to love going to talks, as you're doing now, listening to people, brave, heroic, handsome explorers, talking about their adventures. I used to love these stories. I think, wow, I'd love to be like that. Look how strong and athletic he is, and Olympian bodybuilder. And I thought, actually, I really am not very athletic or strong or Olympian. So I have no natural talent for anything like this. Next problem, if you want to go row across an ocean, you have to be able to tie all sorts of clever knots. You have to be able to do all these things, all these skills. I don't know any of this stuff. I don't have any skill at all to go do an expedition. And the third problem I had was that big expeditions seem to cost huge amounts of money. I was just finishing university. I didn't have much cash at all. So this was not good. My resume at this time read, Alastair Humphreys, no skill, no talent, no cash. This is not a good start for my career in adventure. So perhaps then the sensible thing to have done would be say, oh, well, maybe I'll just get on with normal life, or I will practice for a few years and build up some skills and go to the gym and earn lots of money, and then I'll have an adventure. But I slightly worried that if I did that, real life would get in the way, and I actually wouldn't get round to ever doing it. And what I really should do was just go do something right now. So I thought, there must be some sort of adventure I can do with no talent, no skill, and no cash, or not very much cash. So I had to think, and that's when I came up with the idea of riding my bike all the way around the world. I had a bike. I knew how to ride it. I bought a tent. I took the instructions with me so I could learn how to put it up. That's all you need to cycle around the world. I didn't do any training because I thought, if you're going to go cycling around the world, then who needs to do even more cycling than that? So I did no training at all, which means that when you set off, day one, you ride, woo, quite your legs get tired, your backside gets very sore, and then you just stop. Put up your tent and go to sleep. Next morning, get back on your bike, carry on in the same direction, carry on cycling, till you get tired, stop, put up your tent, and go to sleep. And look, already, I'm 2 days down the road making some progress. I probably won't make it around the world. That's a massive thing to do, so I probably won't make it. But at least if I try, I'll go somewhere. So I got really excited about this. I needed someone to come with me. Of course, I was too scared to go on my own. So I went to all of my friends, and I said, I've had this brilliant idea. Do you want to come cycle around the world with me? And my friends all said, no. That sounds like a terrible, stupid idea. We're going to get jobs and girlfriends and lots of money, and we don't want to do this. So no, we don't want to do this. So this is when you find out who your friends really are. I had none, which isn't funny. Second thing, though, I wasn't too worried. I still had what seemed like my best option, my girlfriend. So I went to her, and I said, darling, I have had a brilliant idea. Do you want to come and cycle around the world with me? And she said, no. And she dumped me. And I then found, which definitely was not funny, because I now found myself with no friends, no girlfriend, having said to everyone, I'm going to cycle around the world, now realizing that I had to actually get on my bike and do it. And this is the moment in my life when I realized I was not going to be Wilfred Thesiger or Bear Grylls. None of their books ever begin with them bursting into tears in front of their mum on day one, which I realized was what was about to happen to me. I was on my bike outside my house, my mum and dad, and I thought, I'm going to start crying. I'd better just go. So I just rode off down the road, out of sight. And it was probably the most lonely, frightening moment of my life, that, setting off just thinking, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. So I rode down through England, got on the boat across to France, feeling very sorry for myself, started cycling through Europe, made it through Europe, popped out into the Middle East, thought, wow, I haven't given up yet, rode through the Middle East, popped out into Africa, thought, wow, I still haven't given up, I'm in Africa, maybe I'll keep going for a while. My plan from here was to ride south all the way down Africa to South Africa. I'm quite a nervous person, so I always worry about bad stuff that might happen. So when I was in Egypt, I was getting very worried about Sudan, and I was particularly worrying about a desert there. I was going to have to go across a big desert. I'd never been to a desert in my life at this time. I'd been on holiday to the beach with my parents, but that didn't really seem like desert training. So I was very nervous about Sudan. And as I rode down through Egypt, I was just worrying over and over. I was thinking, what will it be like? What will it be like? Worrying and worrying and worrying. One day, I had to find out, because the road ended and the desert began. And this is my first ever sight of a desert in my life, and a really interesting moment to be cycling down here. 1 minute you're a person who's never been in a desert. You're very scared, you're very worried, you're thinking about all the bad stuff that will happen. 5 seconds later, 5 meters later, you cross that line, and in one way, nothing changes. You've only gone 5 meters, but in another way, everything changes, because then you go from someone worrying about something to someone who's actually doing it. Here I was in a desert for the first time. I had to cycle through this desert, and I quickly realized that deserts are brilliant places. Deserts are very, very simple places. They're simple but not easy, and there's a really nice difference between the words simple and easy. And certainly in adventures, I think the best adventures are ones that are simple but not easy. You've got to get things right in a desert, but there aren't many things to get right. Get them right, you'll be fine. Get them wrong, and it'll be terrible, but get them right, and you'll be fine. And this gave me a big confidence boost. I rode on through Sudan, popped out into Ethiopia, through the mountains of Ethiopia, on into East Africa, making good progress down Africa. Before I started cycling around the world, a lot of people would give me advice, travel advice about the world. And people were always saying to me, ooh, be careful, out there in the world, there's all these foreigners out there in the world, and it's very dangerous. You'll have a lovely time when you cycle through England. once you get out into that foreign land, oh, it'll be very dangerous. They're foreign people. They'll do horrible things to you. They'll kill you. You'll get robbed, murdered, eaten alive. It's going to be terrible out there in the world. Luckily, before I got so scared as to not begin, I learned a very important thing, which is when someone's saying to you, don't go to that country, it's really dangerous, you should say to that person, have you ever been to that country? And if they say no, as is likely, then ignore them. Luckily, I learned that lesson. I'm sure it's one that's familiar to many of you as well from your own travels around the world. And my experience around the world was interesting because I did the trip by myself, but it really never really felt like a solo project. There's so many people I met around the world who helped me. The kindness of people was one of the most overwhelming impressions of the world. So at odds with the bad stuff we see on TV all the time. It's the kindness of random people I met along the world is one of my favorite memories of the whole experience. Another great thing about travel, of course, is all the delicious food you can eat along the way. Just think all these countries in the world, all the lovely food. Even better if you're a cyclist, because when you're a cyclist, you get incredibly greedy. So you just want to eat a lot all the time. Like these delicious boiled mice in Malawi. High protein, organic, bit disgusting. On I went, and one day, to my amazement, I saw the first signpost for Cape Town, the end of Africa. The first signpost, that's a tangible proof that it really did exist. It wasn't just a place on a map, and only 730 kilometers, only about a week of cycling to go until I reached the ocean and the end of Africa. It was a fantastic feeling to have made it from my front door in England to the ocean at the end of Africa. I thought, wow, I've ridden the whole way from my front door to the end of Africa. That's amazing. Maybe now I can go home and just sit on the sofa and watch TV and never leave the house ever again. I was thinking, no, I've got to keep going. So when I started the trip, my plan was to cycle the continents, fly the ocean, cycle the continent, fly the ocean. That was about the limit of my planning. By now I thought, planes are so boring. Wouldn't it be cool if I could get around the world without leaving the surface of the earth? I had no idea how to do that, but I thought it'd be fun. So I started asking, has anyone got a boat? If you ask people long enough, eventually they'll say yes. So I hopped on a boat, sailed across the Atlantic Ocean over to South America, which is a fantastic adventure in itself. You might be able to see me. I'm the English guy with no suntan, even after a whole year in Africa. Sadly, got to the end of the lovely yachting part, back onto my battered old bicycle at the very, very southern tip of South America. Patagonia, a town called Ushuaia, the most southerly town in the world, on Tierra del Fuego, the land of fire, El Fin del Mundo, the end of the world. Anyone who loves travel, phrases like that, Patagonia just set the imagination racing. And from there, my plan was simple but not easy, to ride north as far as I could until the road runs out on the shores of the Arctic Ocean, northern Alaska. It's quite a long way. If you look on a globe, it's a third of the way around the globe, but logistically at least, it's quite a simple thing to do. You just keep the sea on your left-hand side, keep pedaling for about 1.5 years, and then you'll reach Alaska. So I rode up through wild, windy, beautiful Patagonia. I spent a few months riding through the Andes Mountains up towards, this picture's in Bolivia, beautiful salt lake high up in the mountain, high up in the central high flat area called the Altiplano. Beautiful place. My little tent, a salt lake, completely on my own. 300 kilometers of salt in all directions. No people, no towns, no trees, no insects, nothing. Complete silence. Just me. Off you go. Beautiful, beautiful place. By this time, I'd been on the road for 2 years. 2 years of cycling at this time. Nearly all of it on my own. I was really pushing myself hard on this trip. I was really, looking back, I was ridiculously hard on myself. I was just trying to push myself all the time. So if ever I started to feel happy, for example, I'd think, I'm not meant to be happy. This is an adventure. If I'm happy, it means I'm on a holiday. This is meant to be an adventure, so I must cycle further until I'm really tired and then poke myself in the eye and eat sand for dinner just till I'm unhappy again. That's how I'm meant to be. So 2 years of being hard on myself, having no friends, being on my own most of the time, living in my little tent, eating the cheapest foods everywhere I went. I didn't have much money for this trip, so I lived off whatever was cheapest in every country. I ate a lot of instant noodles. When I started the trip, I was quite rich at the start, and I used to eat banana and jam sandwiches together. double decadence. As I started to get poorer, I used to eat banana or jam sandwiches. By the end of the trip, I was down to bread sandwiches, which is bread with a piece of bread and then a piece of bread on top. I think I was borderline scurvy for most of this trip. Anyway, what I was saying is that by now I've been on the road for 2 years. I was exhausted mentally and just thinking, this is so hard. This is so hard. I'm not even halfway around the world yet. This is killing me. And so getting to places like this, places of real beauty, was so important to me on this trip. When you're doing any journey, any project that's enormous, it can be overwhelming when you just think, oh, the end is so far away, I'll never get there. And what's really important is to just stop every so often and think, wow, look at this, look where I am now. I'm in a salt plane on my bike. This is amazing. And what's also really important, it took me a long time to start doing on the bike, was to stop every so often and deliberately turn around and look back where I'd come and think, I've come a long way. I'm not doing too badly here. I shouldn't be too hard on myself. I often forget to turn around and look how far I've come, which gives me a lot of encouragement for what comes next. So places like this were really important, moments to just cheer me up, boost me, remind me what a privilege it was to be doing this trip, and just fill me up with enthusiasm. And I'd carry on cycling north again, like a little puppy dog. North, 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 Alaska, Alaska, Alaska. That's what I was fixating on. North, up through South America, up through the US, up the west coast of the States, up through Canada, up into the Yukon, up in the northern part of the world of Canada. And there I came across a forest fire, an enormous forest fire. It was huge, and there's only one little road running through this area. The fire was the size of over 1 million soccer pitches. A big, big fire covering hundreds of kilometers, and only one little road. And there was clearly no way I could carry on by bike. By this time, I'd been cycling for 3 years. 3 years on the road now. And I met a fireman here. He was putting out the fire with his hose pipe. He said, oh, I'm really sorry. This fire is going to take me quite a long time to put out. There's no way you can carry on. And by now, I was very accustomed now to people saying no to me. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. It's too hard. And I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with that yourselves. When you do stuff that's different and difficult and not what everyone else is doing, you come up against a lot of people who say no, don't you? You just suck the joy out of life. So I was forever coming up against people saying, oh, no, you can't cycle. It's too far. It's too high. It's too hot. It's too cold. You'll definitely die. Just various imaginative disasters. So by now, I was very good at listening politely to people say, oh, thank you very much for your advice. And then just totally ignoring them and getting on with what I was doing anyway, which I think is a good way to be. But in this case, I had to agree that the fireman had a good point. It was going to be hard to carry on by bike here. What can I do? So I had to think, how can I keep the journey going? I didn't want to give up now after 3 years. I thought, what can I do? I thought, I know, I'm in Canada. Canada is a good place to borrow a canoe. So I borrowed a canoe, put my bike into the canoe, and set off to canoe for 800 kilometers down the river Yukon. And the river went right through the middle of the fires. My theory was, if I was on the river, then the fires wouldn't get me. So well, don't laugh, I'm still here, it worked. I set off paddling down this river, 500 miles, 800 kilometers till I was past the fires. Beautiful wilderness, no signs of humans at all. Big salmon, big fish swimming around the river, millions of mosquitoes, grizzly bears running around the riverbanks. I used to put my tent up on little islands in the river because I told myself that bears probably can't swim very well, so I'll be fine if I'm on an island in the middle. Help me sleep better. It was a beautiful adventure, and all the better for being unexpected. Past the fires, back on the bike, up to Alaska, jump on a boat, over to Asia, and now all I had to do was cycle through Russia, all the way down Japan, right the way across China and Asia and Europe, and all the way back home to England. Back home for a nice cup of tea, traditional English celebration. So I did this trip by myself. I had no sponsored, no TV crews, no support. No one really knew what I was doing. No one cared. It was just me doing what felt important and challenging to me. And I thought, if I'm going to do this, I might as well do it right. Let's not take shortcuts. Let's do it right. I want to do a trip that when I'm old and looking back on, I'll feel proud of. And so in my tent, I had this, I had an inflatable globe in the tent, which I used for major strategy meetings with myself. I blew up my globe, had a look at it, and then I saw, up in northeastern Russia, I saw this road running through the Far East, through Siberia. And as soon as I saw it, I thought two things went through my mind. First was, that looks like an amazing road. And the second thought I had was, that looks very stupid. And what I've realized with adventures is that when you get those two thoughts close together, when you think, wow, that sounds exciting, and then you think, wow, that sounds stupid, dangerous, difficult, blah, 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 when you got those two thoughts, that's when you should definitely do it. So I thought, right, I'm going to go cycle through Siberia. Siberia, famous, of course, for being very, very cold. So you have to be very careful about your planning, your preparation, your timings. And as I was planning and preparing, or the more I was preparing, I started to think, Siberia is so famous for the cold, for the winter. If I'm going to go to Siberia, I might as well do the job properly. And that's when I came up with the genius idea of cycling through Siberia in the middle of wintertime, which is definitely one of the most stupid things I've ever done in my life. Cycling through Siberia in the middle of winter is not a fun experience, in case you need me to tell you that. The temperatures were down to minus 40 degrees. Celsius and Fahrenheit are the same at minus 40, so whichever flavor of temperature you speak in. Minus 40. It's hard to imagine, especially in Saudi Arabia, especially in this warm theater, in the dark, gently nodding off to sleep. I can see who you are. So it's quite hard to imagine minus 40. So the best way I can describe it is think about your freezer at home. Freezers are about minus 20 Celsius-ish. So where I was minus 40. Much, much colder than being in a freezer. Imagine living in a freezer for 3 months. It was brutal. Cycling's not too bad. You cycle until you warm up. Don't get too warm, though, because if you sweat, that will turn to ice later. So just mediumly warm. The difficulty becomes everything else. Putting up the tent, brushing your teeth when your toothpaste is frozen solid, taking photographs when your camera batteries decharge almost instantly at minus 40, and you have to keep the batteries in your pants, going to the toilet at minus 40. Life is just brutal. Trying to get any sleep, it was horrific. I was so out of my depth. I was very, very frightened, very, very scared. I spent quite a lot of time crying. Crying at minus 40 is not very helpful, though, because your eyes just freeze solid. And then I get really annoyed. I hate this stupid place. It's the worst idea I've ever had in my life. Nobody loves me. Oh. It was awful. It was so bad. It was so bad I was worrying that I was going to die. Then as the weeks progressed, it was so bad, I was worrying that I would never die and this would not end. It was awful. The weird thing, though, is now that time has passed, and now I look back at these pictures of the worst time of my life, I now look back and think, those are the best days of my life. And isn't this the annoying thing about human nature? Sadly, we can't get eternal fulfillment from sitting on the sofa, eating ice cream, watching football. And the stuff that really matters is the stuff that we slog for and we graft for and we grit our teeth and we think, why am I doing this? And we curse ourselves and we think, I want to give up. And then one day we look back and think, that was what it's all about. Humans are strange. Anyway, at the time, I was very, very glad to get out of Russia, into Japan, and then a few months cycling the length of Japan, crossed over to China, spent a few months cycling the length of China, and now I've really started to think, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it all the way around the world. This trip that at the start I thought was going to be way beyond me, I'm going to do it. All I've got to do now is just keep going west, 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 west. Chase the sunset. If you chase the sunset long enough, eventually you'll get all the way back to where you started from. And so came this very, very strange day when, for the first time in the whole world, really, I suddenly knew where I was going. The last day, I recognized what was going to be around the next corner. There was a chance I might meet someone who knew me, had some sort of connection with me. I wasn't just a permanent stranger anymore. I was riding home. Home's such a special word, even more so after cycling from your front door all the way around the world just to get back home again. So I got back to my front door, and I'd done it. By the time I got home, I'd cycled 73,000 kilometers, or 46,000 miles. It took me 4 years and 3 months to do. I rode through 60 countries, 5 continents, and the whole trip cost me just under £7,000, which I'll allow you to convert into the currency of your choice, pre or post Brexit valuation rates. It's a pretty cheap way to spend 4 years of life. I got home, my mum and dad were there, they gave me the traditional warm British welcome of hello, and I said hello, and they gave me a cup of tea. I said thank you, I drank my cup of tea, and woof, I'm home. And it felt like I'd been home for about 10 minutes before my father, started to say, when are you going to get a haircut? I had crazy hair by now. And when are you going to get a proper job? And I thought, oh, man, real life just hunts you down in about 10 minutes, and people are already saying, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? What am I going to do next? Oh, I think my life might have peaked a bit early here. I thought, what am I going to do for the next 60 years of my life? So I started thinking, and there's so many aspects of that bike trip that were important to me, which I won't go into today, but the thing that I think is relevant to today is this. I started the trip as a very normal person, and I spent quite a lot of time at the start of my talk trying to emphasize that point to you, because I was a very normal person. I cycled all the way around the world, which is not a normal thing to do. I came home and I realized that I was still the same person. I was just still a normal person. I really was surprised how little I'd changed by the trip. But what had changed in me was very interesting. Well, I think it was interesting. What had changed in me was that I now realized that I could do something difficult. For the first time in my life, I tried something really big, and I'd done it. And I now thought, wow, if I've done that, what else could I do? So my mindset had changed now, and I started thinking, wow, if I've done that, what could I do? I had confidence, and I had momentum, and they are worth more than many millions of pounds. I thought, wow, this is exciting. If I've done that, what else can I do? So since then, I've been doing different sorts of expeditions around the world, different sorts of journeys, some very hot places, some very cold places. The one thing that's common with pretty much everything I do is that I like to do things that are different. This university, I suppose, I'm guessing all universities work around the principle of striving for real excellence in something very, very detailed. It's why I've been enjoying the last couple of days. One of my favorite activities, whenever I meet someone who's done a PhD, is I always ask them, what's the title of your PhD? Because I love how obscure these things are that people become amazing at. And I love expertise in life. That's not me, though. I love trying new things, different things, trying stuff that I've never done before, trying to learn quickly and become competent in different things. And a lot of the trips I've done have been inspired by my heroes. So Wilfred Thesiger, Captain Scott, the polar explorer. And I think it's really important to have heroes. Heroes are something to aspire towards. But what I've realized about my own heroes is that my heroes are not really heroes. My heroes are just normal people who made a choice to try and do something that was extraordinary and accomplished it and therefore earned hero status. And what I try and do now is I find heroes. I think it's good to choose different heroes. I choose heroes and then I try to emulate them. I won't match them almost by definition. You're not going to match what a hero does, but at least I'll do stuff that's more bold than if I hadn't tried to do that. So I'd really encourage you to pick a hero and don't make the mistake of thinking they're heroes. Just realize they're normal people and you can chase in their footsteps. Anyway, I've been doing lots of different adventures and enjoying them very much. And when I open a map of the world, I see places, think, wow, I'd love to go there, I'd love to go there. And I pretty much would like to do any adventure possible. Although actually there is one interesting exception. Sometimes in the adventure world, I've come across stories of people rowing across oceans. You get in quite a small rowing boat, say maybe from me to the podium. You get in a small little rowing boat, no engine, no motor, no sail, no rescue boat, no helicopters flying around. Just you and a couple of friends who may become enemies in a little rowing boat, and then you set off and you go backwards like this for thousands of miles, many, many weeks across an ocean, being simultaneously claustrophobic and agoraphobic, getting very, very seasick, getting eaten by sharks and whales and those giant squid that reach up in the night and pluck you to the depths. I don't know if they even exist, but they scare me. Getting run over by massive Chinese freight ships that don't even see you and just crush you because you're too small for their radar. Massively running out of things to talk about and just hating each other and realizing that in the end you have nothing to talk about because you've spoken about every subject there is. And now the only conversation left is who's in the most pain from saltwater sores on your buttocks that just rub raw to be absolute agony when you have to spend all day sitting down, going backwards. Which is a long-winded way of saying, I think rowing oceans is a terrible, terrible idea that I would never want to do. Sorry. Anyway, one day I was at home, I got an email, opened the email, some random Slovenian guy who'd been reading my website. Say, hello, Al. Been reading your website. I'm about to row across the Atlantic Ocean. Wondered if you fancy coming with us. We leave in 6 weeks' time. That is a brilliant laugh. I love that. And I thought to myself, no, I do not want to row the Atlantic Ocean or any other ocean for all the reasons I just said. I definitely don't want to go with you, weird Slovenian person who I've ever met. Setting off to sea with some bloke from Slovenia you've never met seems like a ridiculously bad idea. And 6 weeks, you can't get ready for an expedition in 6 weeks. This is stupid. So I wrote back to him and I said, yes, let's go and do it. And I said yes because I realized this was such an opportunity. And rowing an ocean is an extraordinary thing to try to do. And offers like this don't pop up in your email inbox too often. And I've realized that opportunities never come along at the right time. You either don't have enough time, or you don't have enough money, or you've got time and money, but by now your knees have packed in. So what I really try and make myself do now when exciting things come along is to just say yes to them and then frantically scrabble to somehow make it happen. So I set off to row across the Atlantic Ocean. There were 4 of us. All of my nightmares came true. This was an unbelievably miserable experience. It makes cycling through Siberia seem like a summer holiday in Dubai. It was awful. You row for 2 hours, rest for 2 hours, row for 2 hours, rest for 2 hours, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. From the time you set off until you bump into the Americas, like Christopher Columbus, 3,000 miles, 4,500 kilometers, 45 days later, doing 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 2 hours on, 2 hours off. No weekends, bank holidays, funerals, you just row. Brutal. Seasickness, massive waves, terrifying, horrible, horrible experience. And now that I've done it, I look back and think, those were the best days of my life. That was amazing. I can highly recommend you, if you're dreaming of adventure, going to row an ocean. What an extraordinary experience to be out there in such a wilderness, pristine, or seemingly pristine wilderness, completely and utterly removed from the world. For a man of my intelligence, this is the closest sort of feeling I'll ever get to being an astronaut, being in space, being so far removed from the planet and everything and all its petty worries and woes. The total and utter reliance on your skills, on your expertise, on the equipment that you've chosen to bring with you and have the nous to be able to fix and repair. If you've forgotten anything, you're doomed. We started the trip with 4 spoons. By the end, careless washing up duty, we'd run out of spoons. We were eating with our hands. If you run out of stuff, it's gone. And of course, you're reliant upon each other. Putting your life literally in someone else's hands and accepting that they are doing the same to you is an extraordinary thing. And I began this trip as total strangers with them. We became very, very close friends. And what was interesting about this was that, I think you would imagine that for an expedition like this, you need to be tough, and you need to be strong, and you need to be brave, and you need to be very manly and have a big beard and all these sorts of things. That's rubbish. To row an ocean, what you need to do is to be kind. You need to be kind to other people. And I think that's a quite obvious thing to accept, is you need to be kind. What was more important and more difficult, and I think definitely more difficult for men, I think, was you need to accept kindness. So, for example, rowing along, I've been seasick for 10 days, could barely move, horrible, very weak, terrible feeling. Someone says to me, "You're looking very weak. Let me help you by rowing for you for an extra 10 minutes. My natural inclination is to say, "No, I'm not weak, I'm fine, I'm going to row all night, I'll show you." And that's ridiculous. And what we had to do on this trip was to acknowledge our weaknesses and to accept kindnesses. And so being able to say, "Thank you. I feel terrible. Thank you for giving up 10 minutes of your sleep. I know very much how much that is worth. Thank you for your kindness, and I accept it." And accepting kindness and offering kindness was what got us through that trip. It was an extraordinary experience. And what was really interesting about this was I was so sick of it by the end. I thought, right, when I get home, I need something that is dry and non-wobbly. I want to sleep somewhere that doesn't wobble, and I don't want everything to be soaking wet. And that's perfect preparation for walking across an empty quarter. And what was really interesting about these 2 trips was how almost identically similar the experiences are. You could write a a book about rowing an ocean and just swap the word ocean for desert, and you could swap the word wet for dry, and you could swap the word annoying salt for annoying sand, and you pretty much have the same story. They're identical things, which brings me back to the where I was when I cut off talking about the empty quarter, just about to launch off into what seemed like a big thing, but really wasn't, because I'd just been doing little step, little step, little step, little step for 15 years or so, and now I was ready to be out there and to enjoy being out in the desert with all the wonderful things of deserts that you will know living in Saudi Arabia. What was interesting as I was preparing this talk, was thinking of the stuff that I would normally say in a talk to people in England. Some of those things I don't need to say to you. In England, I'd have to spend time explaining that deserts are really hot, and how it feels to be somewhere really hot, and how it feels to be surrounded by sand, and what it does for your mind being in some ways, seemingly monotonous landscape. These things that I have to explain, you know them because you live here. And what I would like to emphasize to you to try to do is to, especially if you're not native from here, is to look again at your normal with fresh eyes. It's quite easy to just get a bit jaded and a bit familiar with wherever we live. So I'd urge you just to think when you're out and about, out in the desert next, to just think, wow, this is different, and to reappreciate normality. Anyway, where was I? Here, walking through the empty quarter desert, excited to be out somewhere, following my hero. We had Wilfred Thesiger's book with us, and we could read where he talked about crossing sand dunes and how silent it was and unchanged in thousands of years. And I could romantically imagine we are having exactly the same experience as he was 80 years ago, or that some Bedou crossing the desert who wasn't writing a book about it 800 years ago. We're all having exactly the same experience. And then we kept getting to stuff like this. Man-made stuff. The empty quarter is not as empty as it used to be. Oil pipelines, and that now in England, I now talk about the effect of oil on this part of the world. I think I don't really need to do that today, except to say that it really started to jar on me. I was thinking, I want to be in an empty wilderness desert. I want to be living in the olden days. I don't want deserts. I don't want there to be these dirt tracks going off to oil refineries with massive trucks on. This isn't what I want. This is not the trip I wanted. And we were like two little petulant children walking through the desert, just really annoyed, thinking, this is not what we wanted. Big lorries, rubbish. And as time progressed, though, we started to think about things like this, because the vast majority of our trip was in Oman. The people there were just insanely kind who were living in Oman. And a big lorry couldn't drive past, also very curious as well. So a big lorry can't possibly drive past two English people hauling a cart without slamming on its brakes, juddering to a halt, popping out with lots and lots of questions about what on earth we were doing, and then insisting that we sit down for coffee. And this is the coffee pot from his name was Ali, the driver of that last lorry, and sitting around here, drinking coffee, chatting about rubbish, gossiping about the world, we came to think, actually, not much has changed. This is pretty much what Wilfred Thesiger's books are filled with. Him sitting around little campfires, drinking little cups of coffee, gossiping with a load of Bedou blokes about stuff. Not much has changed. Some things have changed, other things have not changed at all. And this gave us a real sense of reassurance, really, that we were just doing a 21st century version of a journey. As we started to approach Dubai, we ended up being back on proper roads, more lorries juddering to a halt. Imagine this. You're walking through a desert. You're so hot. All the time you're hot, and you're thinking, I wish Father Christmas would stop with a big lorry full of refrigerated ice cream and frozen drinks and stuff like this. And then the lorry slams to a halt. The guy opens up the back and just gives us armfuls of freezing cold stuff. And he insisted, I'm afraid I don't know his name, he's from Saudi, and he insisted that when we got to Dubai, we should give him a call, and he'd kill a camel, and we'd have a great feast together. And he was such a fun guy. The film we've made about this trip, he features in it, and a very short story. Somehow, someone ended up in seeing our film in Saudi Arabia, liking his inclusion, tracking down the company, which I believe is quite a famous company, tracking down this guy, luckily not telling him off for giving us loads of stuff out the back of the truck, but giving him an award in his business for being kind and being a good ambassador for his country, which I think is a brilliant story that sums up to me the human side of our experience walking through this fraction of the empty quarter. And so at last, to the end of our journey, walking into Dubai after walking over 1,000 kilometers without having had a shower for all that time. We chose Dubai as the end of our trip because when Theshti was there, it was a tiny little fishing village. Now it is this, and we were interested to use that comparison intrigued us. And we decided that what a great place to finish our trip, the top of the Burj Khalifa. So we tried to get permission to walk up all the stairs to the top. Secretly, we were glad when they said, no, you can't have permission to do that, but we'll give you a free lift pass. Very embarrassing moment for the two of us, going in this lift. We haven't washed for over 1,000 kilometers. In come a bunch of local Arabic men wearing the beautiful white clothes, smelling amazing, as men do in this part of the world. The lift doors closed, and we smelt so bad. Going up, 800 floors, thinking, this is so embarrassing, this is so embarrassing, this is so embarrassing, this is so embarrassing. Ding! We walked out, shook hands, and our heroic desert expedition came to an end. It's the only expedition I've ever done that finished outside a Dolce & Gabbana store. And it was a wonderful, wonderful journey. It really was something that I really treasure. However, I need to confess something, which is that adventurers like me stand up on stage and talk about how heroic we are. Aren't we heroic? Go buy our book. It's brilliant, that sort of thing. That's the general life of an adventure. But what I've come to have to confess is that really the stuff I do, anyone could do any of this sort of stuff. And I was starting to think a bit more, and I was starting to get emails from more and more people who'd read my books, who'd read my blogs, see my videos, who don't know me, essentially. And that's the important thing. People who just read a book about some guy who's had a big adventure, but who don't know me, the normal person I am, who start sending emails saying things like, "Dear Alastair Humphreys, I wish that I could go on adventures like you. I wish that I wish I had all your skill, talent, and cash. I wish I was as heroic and handsome as you." I made that last bit up. But the first bit is essentially true. People saying, "I wish I had the talent, skill, and cash you do." And that strikes me as crazy, of course, because at the start of my talk, I was saying that these were the very things that were stopping me. And I realized that there are so many barriers that stop us living as adventurously as we might choose to do. Some of them are genuine ones, a lack of time, a lack of skill, a lack of expertise. But most of these barriers we have that stop us living adventurously are just in our own heads. They're psychological things that we eliminate ourselves from the race before we've even started. We think, I'm not the sort of person who can go do adventures, so I don't do them. So what I wanted to start to do was to say, you can do adventure anywhere. It's just your attitude. It doesn't even matter if you don't like riding a bike, sleeping in a tent, not having a shower for a month. If you don't like that stuff, you can still live adventurously. Living adventurously is just doing things that are new to you, different to you, difficult for you, challenging for you, and doing it with a mindset of being curious and open-minded and enthusiastic and having a good sense of humor and being willing to just look a bit of an idiot in the sense of trying, in the name of trying to do something bold. And if you're willing to do that, you can have adventure anywhere. So I decided I wanted to try and do the most boring adventure in the world. And I decided I wanted to do an adventure somewhere so boring just to prove that you can do adventure anywhere. So I live in London, in England, and I started thinking, where do I really hate? I'll find somewhere I hate, I'll go have an adventure there. And that's when I came up with the idea of walking a lap of oh no, what have I done? I haven't put the best picture in. I'm such an idiot. Why have I put a picture of a mountain? I was meant to put a picture of walking around London. What an idiot I am. I apologize. I decided to walk a lap of London, following this big highway that goes all the way around London. It's crowded, it's ugly, it's noisy, it's dirty, it goes through suburbs. It's really not adventurous. And as I walked around that, it took a week to do. Time and again, I just kept thinking, this is exactly the same as cycling around the world. It's exactly the same thing. I'm going places I've never been. It's a challenge. I'm finding pockets of beauty, even in amongst the city bits. I'm meeting interesting people. This is exactly the same as cycling around the world. This is an adventure. It's not a big adventure, obviously. It's a tiny adventure. It's what I called a micro adventure. An adventure so small that really there's no excuse that we can't all go do something. And the reason I chose the word micro-adventure was because I wanted to really say, it doesn't matter how small your adventure is, however tiny it is, let me gather you up, scoop you up, lift everyone up on their tiny adventures. We're starting. And once you start small, you get going, you can do more and more things. I love doing canoe journeys, but buying a canoe is expensive, and you have to learn you have to find somewhere to store it and all these things. So I did a story about just buying some inner tubes, the tubes that go in the wheels of tractors, drifting down a river with your friends on a summer day. If you don't enjoy drifting down a river on inner tubes on a summer's day with your friends, you have no soul. Drift down the river, get out before you disappear out into an ocean. Build your own little rafts. These sort of things that I used to enjoy as a kid, I still enjoy, trying to just live a little more childlike. Not childish, but childlike in the things that I do. If you haven't got any equipment at all, swim down a river. Even a river close to you, it changes your perspective. If you see a river every day, once you get in it, down to eye level, the world looks very different. If you change your perspective on things, things become more adventurous. And the final example of micro-adventure I want to give is the idea of getting smaller and smaller and smaller, simpler and simpler and simpler, going from a big frothy latte coffee down to a tiny little cup of local Arabic coffee, getting to the real essence of adventure. Adventure for me is going places new, being out in the wild, and you can do that anywhere. For example, and we have a choice of how we see things. So for example, the 9-to-5 job. People are always saying to me, oh, I'd love to have adventures, but I have a 9-to-5 job. And I say to them, you have a 9-to-5 job. What do you do from 5 to 9 when you leave work at 5 o'clock in the evening till 9 o'clock the next morning in your 16 hours of freedom? What do you do? Everything we do, everything in life, we have a choice how we see it. We can see it as a constraint or an opportunity. We can say, oh, I've got a 9-to-5 job. Or we can think, 5 o'clock, I'm out of the office. I'm going to head out of town, go sleep on a hill, sleep under the stars, watch the sunrise, cook on a campfire, listen to the birds sing in the morning, run back down a hill, jump in a river, get back on the bus, head back into town, be back at my computer for 9 o'clock the next morning. Slightly sleep-deprived with twigs in your hair, but still, when your friends in the office say to you the next morning, oh, did you do anything interesting last night? For once, you don't have to tell a lie, and for once you can say, yes. Last night, I had an adventure. I had a micro-adventure. We can seek out opportunities for living adventurously wherever we are. I would love it if any of you thought, that's a good idea. I'm going to go sleep out in the desert and then come back to work. I would love that. It would make me genuinely very happy. But what I'm really trying to say is, if you're trying to do something big, bold, difficult, exciting, climb Mount Everest, you have two choices. You can either think, oh, Mount Everest is so big and so high, and I don't know how to climb, and it's really expensive, so I'll just watch TV. Or you can think, I really want to climb Mount Everest. Therefore, this weekend, I'm going to go climb that local hill I've seen out of town. Next weekend, I'll go climb something a bit bigger, gradually build up little by little by little. You get confidence, you get momentum, you get moving. Little by little, you start to do big things. And I think that's a good theory. The problem with me in my life is I'm really lazy. So I love reading about good theories. New Year's resolutions, I always make loads of them. And by January the 3rd, I've given up because I'm lazy. So I want to tell you one final example for about two or 3 minutes about the doorstep mile in my own life. This is my favorite ever travel book by a hero of mine. A young guy set out to walk through Spain in the 1930s. He didn't know anything about Spain. He knew one sentence of Spanish, and he played his violin to earn the money he needed to live. And he slept out on the hills, talked to people in the villages. It was a beautiful book. And for 15 years, ever since I read it, I've been thinking, I'd love to go and do that trip and write a book about it. I'd love to do that. It'd be brilliant. Trouble is, I can't play the violin or any other musical instrument. Actually, although I don't mind doing a talk like this, if I now had to sing you a song and do a dance, I'd get so embarrassed that I'd run away. So having to perform is about my idea of hell. And I realized, though, that trying to live adventurously, doing stuff that's new and difficult, I wasn't really doing that anymore, because I was just doing these expeditions, walking across deserts, rowing across oceans, cycling a long way. I've done all that stuff. It's not really scary for me. And if I wanted to live adventurously, I should do something that really, really scared me. I should play the violin. I thought, wow, that's an idea. So I got out my phone and I quickly typed in, local violin teacher. I found one, and I sent her an email saying, hello, I'd like to go walk across Spain next summer. With no money, no credit card, only my violin skills to keep me alive. Please, can you teach me so that I don't die of starvation? Best wishes, Alastair Humphreys. Send. Took me 1 minute to do. Forgot all about it. Email comes back. Dear Alastair Humphreys, this is a very stupid idea. The violin takes years to learn. You will definitely die. Very, very bad idea. Come to my house tomorrow morning, and we will begin. So, I bought a violin that very afternoon. I turned up at her house. I quickly learned that violin cannot be quickly learned. Here we go. Oh, it sent shivers down my spine like a blackboard. It's horrible. Maybe I'm being too ambitious. Notice my stolen Arabic number plate in the background. So, there I was, learning the violin. I had 7 months till departure. By the time departure, I could play, well, that was not long before I set off. I could play 5 children's songs, about 20 seconds each, very, very badly. I was thinking, this is too much. This is a really terrible idea. I can't do this. I should learn for a few more years, then I'll go and do it. So I thought the best thing to do is buy my plane ticket right now and begin. So I flew out to Spain. I bought a plane ticket, flew out there. When I got there, I emptied out my pockets of all money, and I was off, walking through Spain for a month, following the route of this book with only my violin to earn the money that I needed. Oh, look, I don't own many shirts in life. So the first time that I stood and took out my violin case in a town to begin to play, I realized was the most frightened I had been since the day I set off to row across the Atlantic Ocean. How crazy is that? Rowing the Atlantic is quite a scary thing to do. Here, what was I scared of? Failing, what people might think of me, looking a bit silly, pathetic for a man in his 30s, but I was so scared. It was a terrifying experience. And the stuff that I've been doing for years, walking hundreds of miles, cooking on fires, this is not adventure for me anymore, because it's what I do. This is me in my comfort zone. I was so sure that I was going to die of starvation that I found a McDonald's ketchup sachet on the road, and I picked it up, and I ate it like some sort of energy cyclist gel, thinking, oh, I have some nutrition at last. And then along came this man. He'd been sitting on that bench over there for about an hour, watching me go, and he got up, and he walked over to me. He said, Senor, and I thought, uh-oh, he's going to tell me off here. I'm in trouble. He's going to say, go away. You're ruining my quiet morning. Go away. But instead, he reached into his pocket, and he brought out a coin, and he gave it to me. This is the most exciting way I've ever earned money in my entire life. He gave me money. I was now a professional musician. But he'd given me money, I could buy a bag of rice. A bag of rice, you can walk for a week. This was possible. The journey suddenly became possible. But more than a bag of rice, he'd given me hope. I thought, wow, I have hope and a bag of rice. What more do you need in life? Oh, and a bag of carrots. Out-of-date carrots are very cheap, I learned. As I got better at busking and learnt the tricks of the trade, I moved on to my glorious staple from cycling around the world, banana sandwiches. Me and them reunited again. And the thing I'd been so scared of on this journey, what will people think about me? Foreigners, strangers, scary people. Of course, as so often, the thing I was worried about became the joy of the journey. The random people around the world who helped me out. And this was a wonderful adventure. It wasn't very big. I only walked for a month, only 800 kilometers through the mountains. This was undoubtedly one of the best adventures I've ever done in my life. Not because of this, heroically standing on mountain, taking picture of self stuff. Because of this, standing up, facing my fears, doing something that was new and difficult and frightening, and making yourself vulnerable. This is what adventure is all about. So I hope that you will go away tonight and think of something exciting and difficult to do. The trouble is, though, or certainly I'll talk about myself rather than painting you the same brush. Myself, I would say, that sounds like a great idea. I'm going to come up with a good plan later. And then I wouldn't. So I want to end by telling you about one of my favorite websites. It's called deathclock.com. Deathclock.com, you type in your date of birth, your gender, your height, your weight, whether or not you're a smoker, and it calculates for you the day you will die. And I have that date in my Google Calendar because I'm lazy. I don't do stuff until there's a deadline. So in my diary, there is the deadline. If I want to get stuff done, it has to be from there. It has one of those repeat entry every day options forever I have in blue. If you want to get something done, you have to begin it. So I'm just going to waste 10 seconds of your life and my life watching my death clock. It's going away, little by little by little by little. So the question I asked at the start, what is your doorstep mile? What tiny thing can you do today that is so small, there's no reason, no excuse not to do it? Sending that email to a violin teacher. What is your doorstep mile? What tiny thing can you do today that will set you in motion, running, jump, to go do something big, extraordinary, and exciting? Thank you very much.
It's hot. As hot as I've ever known. We've already walked a marathon today. We did the same yesterday, and on all the days before that. We've still got miles to go today, and many, many more before we reach the end. I think again about Wilfred Thesiger, the adventurer whose journeys inspired our own, and I'm awed, yet again, by the hardships that he and his Bedou guides encountered out here in these silent, scorching sands of the Empty Quarter Desert. My name's Alastair Humphreys. I live in a little village in England, a pretty normal life, but I seem to have this curse of incurable wanderlust that sees me just wanting to head off on adventures around the world. So far this year I've rowed across the Atlantic Ocean and I've skied up onto the ice cap in Greenland. And I'm just hoping now that I can try and squeeze in one more big trip before the end of the year. So I've just sent an email to Leon. He's a friend of a friend. He's cycled around the world. He's just walked 3,000 miles across Mongolia and China, and this is what I said in my email. Hi Leon, hypothetically speaking, would you be interested in another long walk? 6 to 8 weeks, desert, pulling a cart, November, December, home for Christmas. Who can possibly say no to that?
When I got an email from Alastair Humphreys about doing this trip, I really couldn't say no. This is the sort of thing I love, and even though I didn't know this guy very well, I couldn't imagine anything better to do with a couple of months of my life. I'm really lucky in that I get to make a living from adventure, and by writing articles and giving talks I can make a career out of it. But what I love is actually going out there and doing the adventures, getting out into the wilds of the world for expeditions, and so this ticked all the boxes.
Wilfred Thesiger was an icon of British adventure, and he was one of my heroes. He was born in Ethiopia, and he fought with the SAS in World War II. After the war, he spent his life travelling and living in some of the wildest places on Earth. His greatest journey was crossing the Empty Quarter Desert. He tells that story in Arabian Sands, and ever since I first read that book, I've dreamt that one day I would make a journey of my own, in Thesiger's footsteps, into the Empty Quarter Desert.
The Empty Quarter on the Arabian Peninsula is the largest sand desert in the world, and Wilfred Thesiger spent 5 years here in the 1940s. He travelled by camel, he survived on meagre rations, and sometimes had just 1 pint of water a day. Our journey is going to use him as the inspiration, but it will be very different in a number of ways. Firstly, we have no idea what to do with camels, and we can't afford them, so instead we will pull all of our supplies in a homemade cart. We also can't get into Saudi Arabia as Thesiger did because no tourist visas are issued anymore, so our journey will be 1,000 miles from the south coast of Oman, Salalah, passing through desert and small towns and finishing in the United Arab Emirates in the madness of Dubai.
I love the chance of being able to follow in the footsteps of a hero, even in just on a tiny fraction of what Thesiger did, just to be out in the landscapes that he was in really excites me. I'm looking forward to just doing something that's in a new part of the world, something I've never done before, and also something that's refreshingly low-tech and simple, self-funded, self-organised, self-filmed. It's just the two of us out there doing this trip, doing it not really for any particular reason other than that it just excites the hell out of us, and I think that's a pretty good reason to go off on an adventure, really.
So we leave for the desert a week today, and my main concern at the moment is our cart. It hasn't been built yet, and time is really ticking.
Pretty nervous about our cart. We've got a friend of Al's building the cart. I think he's done an amazing job. The only downside is that he's built it off the specifications that Al and I gave him, which means that essentially it's our idea and our cart, and we don't know anything about carts and have terrible ideas, so there's just an unnerving aspect to the fact that we're reliant on something that we designed. Should we want stuff? Get that. Hopefully it'll be fine.
It's stressful just twiddling our thumbs, so while we're waiting for the cart to be built, we're going to go to Eton, to Wilfred Thesiger's old school. It's probably the most famous school in the world, a school for kings and prime ministers. We want to try and get a bit more of a feel for Thesiger as a man. It seems he was very different to Leon and me. We're pretty normal people, we like normal life, home, pubs, stuff like that. Thesiger hated all that, and he was happy only away in the wild places. So I'm really excited to read his expedition diaries and get a bit of a sense of the man behind the legend. I guess all three of us are people who are drawn towards difficult challenges and difficult places, so there must be some sort of overlap between us somewhere.
I've got a feeling that my diary from this trip won't be quite as, well, firstly it won't be as neat. There'll be a heck of a lot more whinging in my diary.
Wilfred Thesiger's medium was photography, and although Al and I have no support team or camera crew, we still really want to make a film of the journey. In order to do that, we'll have to record everything ourselves, carry all of our equipment, as well as walking every single day. So for inspiration, we've come to Oxford, where all of Thesiger's superb pictures are now held.
We hold 74 personal albums compiled by Thesiger relating to his journeys in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia and Yemen. Also 38,000 negatives, which have all been digitised. And there's about 4 albums which relate to the empty quarter crossing. For the most part, he's interested in characters. And there's this great quote from Arabian Sands where he says, the harder the life, the finer the type. And so he's really looking at the features, the expression on the face, in terms of the types of characters that are being formed by this harsh environment.
With our cart ready in the nick of time, we head to Margate of all places to test it on sand. It'll have to hold 100 litres of water, a month of food, and will weigh up to 300 kilograms. We're going to have to haul it for at least a marathon a day for 1,000 miles. And one afternoon's training on Margate Beach in the pouring rain doesn't really feel like particularly ideal preparation.
It's a wonderful setting for pulling a cart.
This doesn't work, I've run out of excuses. It's been a very useful exercise. I think it's raised a few questions about our cart design and, well, lots of things really.
Yeah, that was much harder than I expected. And it's relentless. You never get a second's rest.
20 minutes ago I was quite confident, and now I'm not so confident. And I'm really hot and really thirsty as well.
In about 15 degrees.
Yeah, after 20 minutes of work.
This is potentially our solitary day of sand testing for a desert expedition.
Outside dreamland. This could be turning into a very bad idea.
Salalah is where Wilfred Thesiger prepared for a trip across the empty quarter 65 years ago. He travelled with the local desert nomads, the Bedou, and came to the city to buy camels and supplies. While we were preparing for our own journey, Al and I will be staying with an expat mechanic called Claudio, who is a friend of a friend, and his wife Kathy. Our first job is to assemble our cart, which we have brought flat packed from the UK. This is 30 days worth of dinner, we hope. And then, for calories, we've got pure dairy, butter, ghee, which we'll take a nice healthy scoop of each night. The food needs to be light, cheap, long-lasting and full of energy, so we've ended up with a pretty horrible mix of noodles, meat and biscuits.
Once we turn off the road into the desert, it's going to be just a blissfully simple expedition. We have all of our food already, we have a limited supply of water, and we just walk out in the desert, experiencing this incredible emptiness. It's going to be brilliant.
I think we're finally just a few minutes from leaving. Al's packing up the rest of our stuff. We're going to do it. We're going to walk across the desert.
We said our goodbyes and set off on the expedition. With the cart fully loaded for the first time, it became apparent very quickly that we had a serious problem.
We've headed out of Claudio and Kathy's house, out into Salalah with this insanely big cart, which is going to be absolute hell until we get to a desert.
One more. So to get out of town, we have to walk on the pavement, holding on to these straps, which is not ideal at all. But we just can't steer. We're sweating profusely already.
After 4 hours and an embarrassingly small amount of kilometres, we gave up. Our expedition was in tatters. Without the cart working properly, we had no chance of making it to Dubai. We called Claudio. He zoomed out to our rescue, accompanied by some of his team of mechanics. Immediately, Claudio comes up with some mad-sounding ideas for building a steering system.
If we do a triangle here, center bar here, pipe,
Yes.
the same frame, down here, down there.
His design certainly cannot be any worse than our own terrible efforts, so we just leave them to it and hope for the best. In the morning, we'll head to the workshop to see what happens.
The great thing about travel are the unexpected twists and turns that come up along the way. Things that at the time seem a real pain or a bit of a disaster, but lead to such fantastic chance encounters and random new experiences. Of course, it's very annoying that we've been delayed by 3 days. It's seriously jeopardized our chances of reaching Dubai. But we've had a great little adventure in Salalah. We've met fantastic, interesting people. Claudio, the mad Eritrean Italian, Mr. Fix-It.
I go mentally crazy.
We've met Pakistani welders, a guy who nearly chopped his fingers off in a rolling machine. This whole new culture of Oman that we would never have got to see through the industrial estates. And tonight we were out in a Omani meat joint, eating camel, goats, cooked by this fantastic bearded, he looked like a Pashtu. And this is a proper Omani experience that was just wonderful.
And swivel point in the center.
Okay.
This is pulling, this is pushing.
Those guys stayed till 11 o'clock last night working on our cart. And then we're back there at 7 a.m. this morning.
I can't believe the changes in our cart since we arrived here. We've had new tyres, the floor, brakes, steerage systems, pulleys, ropes. We've tried all sorts of things. And now we've got this fantastic list of people's autographs all over the cart, all these kind people who've helped us out. What can I say?
Brake bastard.
Our biggest challenge right now is that the cart's built. It looks amazing, and I think it's going to work. But It's about 1:15. We definitely don't want to walk on these roads at night because it's just suicidal. So we've probably got to leave by 3 at the latest, and we've got to test it, drive back to their house, load it up, and go. So it's going to be tight.
My pessimistic nature worries about all the bad things that can happen, but the reality is that probably things are going to be great, and this time tomorrow we'll probably be well on the way out towards the empty quarter desert and the beginning of a heck of an exciting, difficult expedition. I'm really looking forward to it. Bye-bye.
Oh, it's amazing. Look at this card. Yeah, next stop, that huge bloody hill.
Salalah is encircled by a steep range of hills, so once we'd navigated the mayhem of the city's busy roads, we were straight into some pretty tough pulling. We weren't yet used to the heat, the ration food, or hauling the heavy cart. But after 2 difficult yet beautiful days, we made it through the hills and descended down into the beginnings of the desert.
The next morning, we had an unexpected surprise by the roadside.
We just had an absolute result at the side of the road. Alastair's eagle eyes are spotted, loads of packets of crisps have fallen off the back of a lorry.
They're in date as well.
What flavour have we got?
Tomato flavour, potato sticks. Alhamdulillah. I'm surprisingly or worryingly chuffed about this.
Getting very, very hot. Shouldn't be this hard at this time of day. The appeal of walking through something like a desert is to see what happens to your mind and see just how your psychology reacts to being completely alone with so little stimulation. Tarmac roads kind of really undo all of that, because when you're on a tarmac road doing something stupid like pulling a cart, you just feel like an idiot. You see these people in their fast cars and motorbikes. You know, so the sooner we get off this road, the better.
After all our worries in Salalah about the cart, it's a huge relief that it's still going strong. We're on to day 3 now. We're soon about to turn off the road out into the desert, and that's when things will become, well, we'll learn a heck of a lot more about the suitability of the cart.
We have missed our turn off. Which is quite impressive in a desert with only 1 turn, and we missed it. We're going to head off west, slightly south, and try and intersect this gravel road going towards a place called Chishur.
I think this is probably the easiest desert you'll ever get for walking across with a cart, and it's very hard. It's very hot. Then the hills, even tiny little lumps, very, very hard with a cart that's heavy. Oh, it's difficult. But we're moving at a pleasant enough speed. Quite daunting, really. The prospect of a month and a half of this is quite hard.
Wind is really starting to pick up, and when we're walking it's beautiful because it cools us down and sometimes even pushes us along, but in the middle of the day it's so hot between 11 and 2. Finding shade in the desert is not easy, so we have to put up our tarpaulin. And as you can see, that's a noisy and inadequate affair. So we spend a couple hours in the middle of the day sitting underneath this pile of plastic crap. It's just very, very unrelaxing. comfortable there, Alastair?
No, I'm not comfortable. We've suffered a pretty major blow this morning, which is that our thermarest, the foam camping mats that we sleep on, have fallen off the back of our cart at some point this morning. We didn't realise until we set up our lunch break, and so now, having been thinking that my bed was a little bit uncomfortable, we've now got to spend the rest of the trip sleeping on the desert floor with absolutely no padding or insulation or scorpion protection whatsoever. So, pretty important morale boosting blow, unfortunately.
For me, exploration was a personal venture. I did not go to the Arabian desert to collect plants, nor to make a map. Such things were incidental. At heart, I knew that to write or even talk of my travels was to tarnish the achievement. I went there to find peace in the hardship of desert travel and the company of desert peoples.
It often seemed incredible to me, especially when I was on foot and conscious of the steps I was taking. Sometimes I counted my footsteps to a bush or to some other mark, and this number seemed but a trifle deducted from the sum that lay ahead of us. Yet I had no desire to travel faster. In this way there was time to notice things. The very slowness of our march diminished its monotony. I thought how terribly boring it would be to rush about this country in a car.
We've now been on the road just over a week, and I think slowly we're starting to get used to this life. Every morning when we wake up, we know exactly what we're doing and pack away, and we're back on the road and heading off into more desert. It normally takes a little period of time to get into that, and now I'm just used to having no exterior influences really in life. It's just head down and walk and see what the desert offers up. And unfortunately we've had to get back on this road for a few days just to make up some miles, which is slightly depressing, but even still the landscape all around is very lunar, very sparse, and so we just have time alone with our thoughts, and we just walk every day. It's a really simple life. Wake up, walk as far as we can, and go to sleep. And that simplicity is growing on me. It's hard, but it's growing on me.
Far from being the romantic, peaceful, solitude desert campsite that we're hoping for, we've camped somewhere pretty ghoulish with some sort of animal graveyard massacre site. And the whole reason we're here actually is because we suddenly saw up ahead of us some lights. They were flickering away and we had no idea what they were, and people seemed to be moving around us. As always happens on these trips, we ended up imagining all sorts of worst possible scenarios and freaking ourselves out quite a lot, so we sneaked off the road, which is how we've ended up in this animal's graveyard.
It gives me the shivers. I just can't work out why this is here. I'm pretty sure whatever the reason, it's probably a very good reason not to camp next door to it.
Frankly, I'm too knackered to care if they're murderers and I'm in a graveyard. I really don't care. I just want to go to sleep.
It's a real air of death about this place.
After losing our thermarests like total idiots, I think we've now just about redeemed ourselves. We found this fantastic but filthy camel hair laden prayer mat. We found it in the sand, and it's definitely not ideal. It's not luxury, but but it's a heck of a lot better than the gravel floor we were expecting to spend the rest of the trip sleeping on.
This landscape is pretty much the same for hundreds of kilometers, and it changes little bits here and there, but when you walk through it like we're doing, every tiny little thing becomes of so much interest. On a morning like this, when you wake up and there's mist completely blanketing everything and you can barely see the sun, it makes it feel incredibly special, and suddenly we feel really lucky to be out here. And it's not going to last for very long, but I'm sure there'll be something else later today and something else tomorrow. There's a quite high chance that we're going to get absolutely nailed by a truck coming towards us.
We finally found a solution to our sleeping dilemma, which has been that we've been sleeping on this Bedu prayer mat. But today, passed through a little town, went on an exploratory jaunt, and came back with these two wonderful and particularly stylish mattresses.
Downside being that we now look ever more like rag and bone men. Our carts have got number plates strapped all over it. We've now got a prayer mat and two cheap floor mattresses strapped to the top. I don't think we're going to win any expedition awards.
The desert's just a great place for processing thoughts, and it's made me think about a lot of things. What am I doing with my life? Am I wasting it? Am I a bum? Probably. Should I still be a bum? Maybe.
You clearly weren't pulling hard enough.
Can I still be a bum and make a living from it? Who knows? And also, it's made me really miss my family and friends and miss my girlfriend. And one of the things I thought I would come out and think about in this trip is whether or not I was ready to propose to her. And I've decided wholeheartedly that I am.
Nice, actually.
This is a real treat. Hard work after a full day and a few weeks of pulling this cart through the desert, but this is one of the moments we've been waiting for. This is the chance to walk through the desert into the night under the light of the full moon.
It's just beautiful. It's fantastic that the heat has gone away from the day, which is a joy in itself, and the novelty alone is stopping me getting too tired.
The full moon is something that happens regularly, and I never enjoy it. I never appreciate it anywhere else. And I think people who live in the desert, the Bedu, and Thesiger when he travelled here, are always blown away by it.
After an exhausting trek deep into the night, we finally arrive into Mukshin, the small oasis settlement where Thesiger himself struck out northwest into the wilds of the empty quarter proper.
It's a good feeling to be in Mukshin. It's a place that I've read about lots of times, and as is often the case with places you read about a lot, the reality is slightly underwhelming. When Thesiger came here, it was the last outpost where he could get some final supplies before heading into the desert, and I suppose the same still applies today, although we're sitting in a car park with a few effectively Pakistani burger vans. We've been on our feet for 15 hours now, so it's been a long day, and that's never a good frame of mind to consider launching off into the desert. But I think after a curry, a bit of sleep, load up with water, I'll be ready for some adventure tomorrow. We've had a fabulous journey up through Oman so far, but it's certainly an experience that would have felt very alien to the Oman that Wilfred Thesiger knew. But from today, that changes. From today, when we leave Wadi Mukshin here and head out northeast, we're heading out into the empty quarter proper, right out into the desert, to a landscape which I'm assuming will be unchanged since Thesiger was here, and this then is the adventure that we really came here for. It's exciting, it's daunting, it's intriguing. It's going to be very, very difficult, but I feel more excited now than I've felt for the entire journey so far.
I'm definitely feeling quite a lot of anticipation, but also apprehension, because this is serious desert. This is where you can't make mistakes. The heat is relentless, the terrain is quite hard for a cart. It's incredibly unforgiving. Stuck again.
There's so many uncertainties over this next stage of desert, but if it works out, then it's going to be amazing.
Dinner is served. You can see a million pictures of the sand dune and never appreciate it until you get to run up one like a lunatic and jump along the ridgeline. That's just what life is all about. There's only so much you can take from pictures and from reading and television. You've really got to go out and do things to see what life has to offer. And so it's matching up to my expectations. It's hard, but it's wonderful. This is a really interesting and perhaps poignant part of Thesiger's book. He says here, "I knew that if I travelled here alone, the weight of this vast solitude would crush me utterly." I can appreciate that entirely out here. The combination of these enormous dunes which rise from the flat floor, and then these vast gravel plains extending out as far as the eye can see in every direction. They just combine to create a feeling of huge sky, huge ground, and just total, utter emptiness. It's beautiful, but it's pretty intimidating. The sun was scorching hot, and I felt empty, sick, and dizzy. As I struggled up the slope, knee-deep in shifting sand, my heart thumped wildly and my thirst grew worse. I found it difficult to swallow. Even my ears felt blocked, and yet I knew that it would be many intolerable hours before I could drink. We certainly don't have it that bad at all, but I'm thirsty all the time out here. I'm hungry all the time. I'm tired. I'm sick of having sand in my shirt. I'm sick of having sand everywhere. Our challenge, which we, I think, are accepting, is to embrace that, to embrace the unpleasantness, embrace the misery, and enjoy the reward of the desert. I'm hiding out here from the heat of the sun, and all we've got to try and get away from it is the shade from the cart, which is crap.
Completely knackered. My feet are killing me. My legs are killing me. And I can't remember a thing about today. It's just monotonous, exactly like yesterday, and exactly like tomorrow's going to be. I've quite enjoyed it in a weird way, but it seems fairly futile as well.
And the heat just slams down on you. It really messes with my head. I find I can't think straight, I can't see straight, everything just, it's all just a whirl of I don't know what.
The scenery not changing and poles just clank, clank, clank as we walk. Nothing changes and the horizon doesn't get any nearer. And you just start questioning, what on earth is the point?
All the bland, featureless things about it that attracted me to come out here are now just feeling monotonous and rubbish.
We've walked for hundreds and hundreds of miles already, and I know then we can do it. I know we can walk for hundreds of miles, and yet before we get to the end, before we get across this desert, we've still got to cross hundreds and hundreds more miles of this endless flat gravel plain, and it's just mentally so hard to do. I know now we can do it, and if you know you can do it, then what's the point in doing it? I know I can do it. I know I can walk to Dubai. I know I can. I've got nothing to prove to myself or to other people, so why the hell am I doing it? Trudging and hurting and sweating.
As soon as you start to get negative, it just spirals more and more and more. And everything here just crushes you. There's just nothing really to lift your spirits out here.
What on earth am I constantly pushing myself for? Why can't I just be happy in one place like normal people?
Today's been just one of those crazy days. It started off really nice, waking up under the stars with the nearly full moon, and then got progressively worse, as most of our days seem to do. And today was one of the hottest yet, really, really suffering in the heat. But after that, it just got a lot better. We met a Bedu truck driver called Ali, who was waiting to make us coffee, and he was such a cool guy, sitting there with his truck just as the sun was beginning to go down, and he made us some really beautiful coffee, gave us some dates. I always enjoy those conversations where you don't really know what the other person's saying, but you can communicate. A lot of communication is largely physical and through emotions rather than actually words.
Okay, camel. Okay. English, camel.
English what?
Camel.
Camel, huh?
Camel.
I've got a real buzz. It's possibly the coffee that Ali gave us.
Cheers.
And it feels pretty good watching the sunset. I feel like life could be a lot worse. I feel like I could be doing a lot worse right now.
I just feel so excited to be out here again. After the slight frustrating boredom, it just feels exactly the place that I want to be again, and it's great to have the buzz back, have the mojo back, and just be excited to be out here. Suddenly this is feeling like a real expedition, like a real 21st century version of the journey that Thesiger took, so life is very, very good right now.
We're now a really good chunk into our journey. We're really making progress through the empty quarter, and then hopefully in about a week or 10 days pop out into civilization once more.
For a Pepsi.
Alan is bloody Pepsi.
Behind me now is the first oil field we've seen on this trek. It's a pretty impressive sight, the huge black plumes of smoke billowing up into the blue sky and the orange flames flashing around at the bottom. And this, of course, is the whole reason that this entire region's developed, the black gold, the oil that's changed the Arabian Peninsula beyond imagination, and certainly for all time. Thesiger, when he was just about to end his travels here at the end of the 40s, he was lamenting the first explorations into this region by Shell, the oil companies, and he predicted that in the future people might see different things here, but nobody ever again would see the Arabia that he saw, and I think in many ways he's right. Whether that Arabia or this Arabia is better is a very different question altogether.
It feels like the end of the wild part of the empty quarter desert, which is a bit of a shame. It means we're entering back into civilization, and we'll still be in the desert, but we're going to hit blacktop roads and little towns, and then before long we're going to be in Dubai.
We've been waiting a few days for something exciting to happen, and finally we've got it. Behind me is a hill, and when we climb it we might get to see something other than flat desert. I'm looking forward to it.
I take it all back. These hills are a disaster. Hills are the most pointless feature in the entire universe. Give me back flat gravel plains. Give me back monotonous brown sandy desert. Never want to see another hill in my life. I am exhausted.
We've just arrived in Fahud, and it's really good to be back in civilization again. We just had a cup of tea, the height of luxury. We've just been having a good chat with some local lads, and then the call to prayer sounded from the mosque, and they all jumped into their pickup and drove off to pray. It's good to be in civilization, and it's good to be in Fahud, which is the original oil boom town for Oman. This is the first oil town in Oman, so it's an interesting and pretty important bit of history to see.
What's interesting in places like this is that although the way that we're doing these things is really very different from Thesiger, it's basically exactly the same concept. We have to survive, we need water and we need food, and the way we get water is by coming to little restaurants. The way Thesiger got water was by coming to fill up at wells, and really the two couldn't be more different, but the essence is the same. To survive in the desert, you need the essentials for life.
Thesiger himself said that without the local people, his journey would have been a meaningless penance, and for us that's an important part of the trip, to meet people, to learn a bit about Oman, to interact with different people along the way. The kindness of people along the road's amazing. We don't want to be on the road, to find it frustrating and annoying, but it's undoubtedly a great way to meet a random slice of people.
We are going to Dubai. Really? Yeah. We are like Bedu.
Bedu?
Yeah.
You have a milk of camel?
I don't like it. I like Pepsi. I'm an English Bedu.
The kindness that we've seen is just amazing.
Oh, are you sure?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
That's amazing.
This is very good.
Proper desert food.
Yes.
Wow. Lorries stopping, giving us Coke and cake, and thrusting bottles of water on us, and friendly beeps and waves from everyone trying to invite us for tea and coffee. And very good. Some guy we saw a couple of days ago, I jokingly said, "Oh, we need ice cream," and obviously he didn't have any, and now he passes us again 2 days later and says, "I'm sorry I couldn't find you ice cream, but I found you these," and gave us a bag of gifts. Yesterday a lorry driver from Saudi Arabia stopped, insisted that when we get to Dubai we should call him and he'll kill one of his camels and we'll have a great feast. Ice cream in the desert. Thesiger would be mortified but also extremely jealous. I can't believe this. Oh, this is amazing.
Thank you so much.
Oh, welcome. Bit of a Oman souvenir we've been given. It's got a beautiful gold camel, the sand dunes, the palm tree. It's an amazing souvenir of our time here in Oman, made in China.
And now we've been given a few little presents from these people. Every time someone drives past and doesn't give us anything, we can sort of feel ourselves thinking, what a selfish person, they didn't even give us an apple or an orange. This is going to be one of them. Look at that. 3 lads in a truck driving past, and not even a little can of Pepsi for us.
Just a mere beep,
just a mere beep and a wave.
Friendly smile. Is that not enough for you?
No, not anymore. Things have changed.
You've changed.
I've changed.
So nice.
Now we've come out of the desert and we're now walking down this pretty big highway towards the border with the Emirates. Basically from here to Dubai we're on a road, trying not to get run over.
This is everything that Thesiger hated about modern life, the busy roads, the huge fence running the length of the border, and then of course all of the craziness of Dubai. But I think it's a really important part of our trip. This is what the modern Arabia is like. It would be a bit delusionary to spend the whole time just wandering around a sand dune and think you had any grasp of what life was like out here.
Every good journey needs a fittingly impressive destination point, and we're incredibly excited to finish in Dubai. It just feels like the complete antithesis of everything we've seen out in the middle of the empty quarter, and the height, quite literally, of the ridiculousness in Dubai is the Burj Al Khalifa, the tallest building in the world, and that will be our finish point.
Ever since we crossed the border from Oman into the Emirates, the roads have been stressful, busy, and just not enjoyable at all. We've realised that trying to haul our beast of a cart into the middle of Dubai was just a suicide mission. And so we're going to try to find a good home for the cart and carry on through the Emirates. This is definitely no longer a desert adventure, it's an urban challenge now.
We've now crossed the border into the United Arab Emirates. Thesiger took a photo of a lone fort in the desert from about this spot. Today, we're right in the middle of a city of 500,000 people.
So we're now at the Al Jalili fort, which sits in the middle of Al Ain, and our very clear mission now is to get rid of our cart, and what we're going to try and do is donate it to the Thesiger exhibition, which apparently is housed inside this fort, which is a nice idea, except they have no idea we're coming, and we have no idea whether there's any space for it. It's pretty clear we can't take this cart to Dubai, so we've got to get rid of this cart here. I guess whether they like it or not, they're going to end up with a new exhibit for the Thesiger Museum.
The security guard said that they didn't want us to put the trolley in here because they said it looks messy. It was quite insulting. I think it looks very smart. Sat there next to the baby's pram.
This place is just incredible. So much more classy than I could have ever expected. They've got these amazing prints of him crossing the dunes, and now everything has an increased relevance. Everything's just slightly sharper, slightly more in focus. I'm noticing things now, like in this picture there's no clouds. In one of the pictures over there, there's clouds. They cast shadows onto the dunes, and I remember what that's like to see and how that made us feel. I've got to be honest, I'm now feeling pretty nervous about trying to give these people our card. This is such a really well-presented museum. We're going to try and get rid of our smelly, dirty, ramshackle cart here.
So, there we were, in this beautiful, air-conditioned museum. The cart would be great for them, we needed to get rid of it. It was a perfect combination. But we were stinking and weird, and the only way we managed to secure a quick meeting with the director of the museum was with just a wee bit of exaggeration, claiming to have emerged from the desert after the greatest expedition in 100 years, shooting a Hollywood-scale blockbuster. The director was gracious with his time, despite our appearance and the smell, though he did seem somewhat surprised when we offered him our beloved cart.
So we'd like to give it to you as a gift. Yes.
اوكي فاحنا نبقى بدورنا نهديكم الوسيله اللي احنا كنا نتقل فيها اللي هي السياره اللي برا عشان تعرضونها في المتحف عندكم اذا تبغون.
شكرا. Thank you very much.
هاي مبادره جميله منكم يعني ونتمنى ونعرضها في المكان اذا انتم يعني راغبين بذلك.
If you want that, yes, thank you very much for that, and it's good from you that you're gonna give it to us.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. So we've dumped the cart, or rather not dumped the cart, we've ceremoniously presented it to the National Museum. And now we're walking out of Al Ain with these big packs on it. Hot afternoon, busy traffic. This is not fun.
To our surprise, this seemingly simple stretch of road to Dubai had a real sting in the tail for us, and these final few days proved to be some of the hardest and most agonising of all.
It's a pretty awful day. When expeditions get to this phase, there's really only
one thing to do, and that's nail the painkillers, turn up the iPod very, very loud. So today is a day of painkillers and very loud music. This expedition hasn't turned out at all how I thought it would, and perhaps that's why I've enjoyed it so much. When I arrived in Salalah, my plan was to travel with Leon through the empty quarter and to experience sand dunes and gravel plains and emptiness and what Thesiger describes as the silence which we have driven from our world. But the things I will treasure the most on this trip are the good people, the really incredibly kind, generous people we've met. This is not the Middle East of CNN and Fox News. This is the real Middle East of some of the kindest, most generous people I've ever met in the world. It's one of the safest parts of the world I've ever been. And to follow in the footsteps of Wilfred Thesiger, who's always been one of my travel heroes, but to actually come and to sample even a small amount of his journeys has really cemented him for me as one of my all-time travel writing and adventuring heroes and a true icon of British adventure.
Holy moly, that's big. I can't get my head around it. Crazy, isn't it?
The end is nigh. We've made it. We've done it all the way. It's been a hell of a trip.
With respect to Wilfred Thesiger, I think that these places are better places now than they were before. The wilderness is still here for anyone who wants it. The adventure is still there for anyone who would choose to seek it out. But there's a busy, modern, vibrant, cosmopolitan world here now. It's not just silence and emptiness. We shared so much with Thesiger on this journey. The heat, the slog, the dull food, the sense of isolation, yet so much was completely different. But when you follow a hero, their adventure is only really a catalyst. You can't replicate a journey because each one is unique and unpredictable and unrepeatable, and that's the magic of travel. We didn't really have the time, the money, or the expertise to do this trip, but we did it anyway. We pushed ourselves hard, really hard, and now we've done it. We've made it. Although our journeys and our personalities are very different, I think Thesiger summed it up well for all three of us with these words from Arabian Sands. I remembered my excitement when the chance came to go to the desert, the determination to cross it, and then the doubts and fears, the frustrations and moments of despair. Now we've crossed it. To others, our journey will have little importance. It didn't break any records or push any new limits. It was a personal experience, and the reward is nothing more than memories that will last us a lifetime. We're content with that.